The New York Rangers have finally hired their new head coach, and it will be Mike Sullivan, formerly of the Pittsburgh Penguins and also a former New York Rangers assistant coach as well. And of course, in today's video, we're going to cover what this means for the team going forward, as Mike Sullivan is definitely a very kind of high-tier head coach, you could say, and is now the highest-paid coach in NHL history. It's a record-breaking deal that he's getting, as well as it being a 5-year deal. So Mike Sullivan definitely seemingly is going to be here for the long-term future, potentially. And, with this being Chris Drury's third head coach that he has now hired as the general manager of the Rangers, this is one that he's going to need to get right, and it very well could end up being the last head coach that he does hire if things don't go well with this team. So let's get right into it here and take a look at what this means for the Rangers. And first off, I'm not surprised by this move at all. With him obviously separating from the Pittsburgh Penguins there and them kind of parting ways, to me, it was always like a very good chance it was going to be Mike Sullivan. There's a connection there with Drury and Sullivan. We'll take a look at that in a bit. But with Mike being the, I would say, best head coaching candidate that was available, to me, it's really not surprising at all, especially when you do consider the Rangers have a pretty big checkbook, I'd imagine, with James Dolan back there. So they're obviously able to outbid, I'd imagine, pretty much almost any team out there. For a guy like Mike, who, especially among the teams that were interested in and looking for a head coach, right? I think the Rangers definitely were the team that could offer the most money. So him getting that, record-breaking deal now, a 5-year deal, it's really not surprising to me. And especially with, where this team is at right now. And I know some fans want to see this team kind of do a bit of a rebuild or retool kind of thing. But to me, it's just not going to happen, whether we want to see that or not as fans. So going after a veteran head coach isn't too surprising. And, there are guys out there like Jeff Halpern, a Jay Leach, maybe, a guy like Todd Nelson. There are some good kind of young guys out there, David Carl as well, that might have been, great candidates as well. But obviously with the Rangers probably wanting to go with a more experienced guy, with them wanting to get right back into things, competing for that cup, it's not too surprising to go with a guy who's already won multiple Stanley Cups and has been a very good and obviously a coach with a lot of experience as well. And let's take a look now at the connection between Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury, as there actually is a bit of history between these two. Nothing too insane there, but they have been a part of the same teams a couple times, as both of them were a part of Team USA at the Four Nations Face-Off tournament that happened back in February. We saw Chris Drury as an assistant general manager, and of course, Mike Sullivan was the head coach. So they definitely could have been talking a bit then, which, might have helped kind of lead things along and kind of carry things along pretty quickly here, of course, with the negotiations and stuff like that. Then you also see here Mike Sullivan, who was an assistant coach of the New York Rangers for a few seasons there back in the early 2010s from 2009 to 2013. But on that team in 2009, 10, as well as 2010-11, we ended up seeing a player on that team by the name of Chris Drury, who was, of course, coached by Mike Sullivan, who is now the head coach of the Rangers. So kind of funny that, the now general manager of the Rangers, being Chris Drury, is obviously hiring a guy who he was actually coached by back with the Rangers back in the early 2010s there. So that's kind of funny there. Pretty cool to see, of course. And now taking a look at Mike Sullivan's coaching career up to date, where he began things back in 2002, 2003, where he was the head coach of the Providence Bruins in the AHL. And that season as well was an assistant coach for the Boston Bruins in the NHL, of course, as well. Then the season after that, in 2003, 2004, as well as 2005, 2006, he becomes the head coach of the Boston Bruins, as well as in that 05-06 season, he was also an assistant coach for Team USA at the Olympics. Then in 06-07, he becomes the head coach of Team USA at the World Championships. In 07-08, he becomes the assistant coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as that same season, once again, assistant coach for Team USA at the World Championships. Then in 08-09, he takes a job with the Tampa Bay Lightning as an assistant coach. Then in 09-10, that's where he begins his time with the New York Rangers, where he spent 4 consecutive seasons from 2009 to 2013 as an assistant coach with the team, of course, for the first 2 years being with Chris Drury. Then you see in 2013-14, he gets a job as an assistant with the Vancouver Canucks. Then in 14-15, he's a development coach with the Chicago Blackhawks. In 15-16, he becomes a head coach of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, as well as the same season there, also got promoted to the job with the Pittsburgh Penguins as their head coach. Then, of course, that begins his long career with the, of course, Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL, being their head coach from 2015-16 all the way up until 2024-2025. This past season, of course, where now he is, of course, joining the New York Rangers. And now let's take a look at what Chris Drury had to say on hiring Mike Sullivan. He ends up saying, quote, Mike Sullivan has established himself as one of the premier head coaches in the NHL. Given his numerous accomplishments throughout his coaching career, including 2 Stanley Cups and leading Team USA at the international level, Mike brings a championship-level presence behind the bench. I've gotten to know Mike very well over the years, including as a teammate in the 1997 World Championships when he coached me as a player in New York and throughout our shared time working together with USA Hockey. As we began this process and Mike became an available option for us to speak with, it was immediately clear that he was the best coach to lead our team. And like I said, I'm really not surprised by this hire at all. There is, like I said, some pretty big history there, at least a bit of history between Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury, which obviously kind of helps things along here. And, with the teams that were looking for head coaches, to me, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense for Mike to go anywhere else but the Rangers when you consider the other teams that were, looking for a head coach there, like, let's say, Anaheim and, Boston, for example. Those teams aren't really close to competing, and maybe, the Ducks obviously have a lot of great young guys, so maybe in the next year or two, they're going to start to make that kind of push towards the playoffs and maybe can try and do something. But if we're being honest here, over the next 3-4 years, the team with the most likely chance of winning the Cup out of the teams that are looking for a coach right now, I would probably say is the Rangers. And I know this team is by no means perfect, but you added a new coach like Mike Sullivan here, and I don't think coaches are obviously near as important, for example, as the NFL, let's say, right? You need a head coach there. You need your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator, right? You're running play by play, right? It's a lot more coaching involved. Whereas hockey, it's not as important to have such an incredible coach. Obviously, you want the best coach possible, but it's at the end of the day, you still need the right players to get the job done. And I'm not saying you don't in the NFL, but obviously coaches can have a lot more of an impact on the game of football compared to hockey, for example. So obviously, him just being this incredibly accomplished guy does not mean this team is going to completely turn things around and going to be an absolute powerhouse next season, but with Mike Sullivan coming in here and being a head coach with all those accomplishments, stuff like that, and working with guys like, a JT Miller, for example, a Chris Kreider if he sticks around, obviously, a Vincent Trocheck, and Adam Fox, right, with Team USA there at the Four Nations Faceoff this year. He's already worked with Chris Drury, right? There is a connection here with some of the players, as well as, of course, the general manager. So all that definitely helps things out. And I just think if the right moves can be made this offseason there, and I'm hopeful we do see trades with guys like Kreider and Keandre, of course, and, really start to see this team kind of really push in a different direction compared to the last 2 years. And if they can do that, and Chris Drury can make the right moves with bringing in a new head coach here, who I think is a very good one, a top tier one at that, definitely I would say at least like a top 5 guy in the NHL coaching wise, this could definitely change things a lot for this team. And of course, having a guy like Igor in the net there as well is always going to be an incredible thing. I know some fans definitely don't love that contract, and I get it. It's a lot of money for a goalie, but let's remember, if this team can get to the playoffs, we have seen what Igor can do. He does absolutely a phenomenal job when things matter most in the playoffs there. That's when he shows up. So in my opinion, if the right moves can be made there, you have a goalie like Igor already, you already have some solid pieces on the team, and you add in a very good coach, an elite coach like Mike Sullivan, a premier coach like Chris Drury said, things can definitely get back on track quite quickly for this team. And some fans think that maybe it's going to be a few years away, and that's definitely a possibility, right? I'm not saying it's a guarantee that this team is going to be a contender next season, but what I am saying is a possibility. This team has some good core pieces right now on it. I mean, Igor, phenomenal goalie. You have number 1 defenseman, Adam Fox. You've got Braden Schneider, Borgen. Those are some solid pieces in the back end there as well. You add another guy, a true top 4 guy. That could definitely change the back end there a lot, especially with Mike hopefully bringing in a very good defensive coach, because I think it's pretty clear that, Phil Housley there did not do a good job at all. I think we're just being honest here defensively. I mean, he was the defense coach. Things did not work out in any way for this team defensively this season. So getting a new defensive coach in there, changing up a couple positions here and there, trading a guy like Keandre, you added a new top 4 guy possibly, that could help that decor out quite a bit. And then you already have that elite goaltender, of course, in Igor. You switch out the forwards a bit there, add in a third line center, get some of the young guys to take those steps up in their development, then this team can really be a potential kind of contender next season. It is a possibility. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it definitely is a possibility for this team. So overall, I am very happy with this hiring. I'm not surprised by it at all either. I obviously was more than okay if they went out and hired a guy like a Jay Leach or a Jeff Halpern, who I'm a big fan of. A guy who's learned under a John Cooper for quite some time now, and obviously they decided to go with an older guy and not go with like a guy like David Carl or Halpern or Leach. And it is what it is. I'm not upset by that. I understand why this team did this because they want to go out there and compete this season. And I know some fans don't love that, but that's what they're going to do. That's the plan, and that's why I think this team has the chance, though, with hiring Mike Sullivan to get right back on track for next season. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post every single day at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And of course, don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on the New York Rangers hiring Mike Sullivan as their next head coach. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.